I haven't talked about them much on this channel, but fighting games are one of my favorite genres of video games after RPGs. They've always been one of the ways I've been able to connect with other people and have been a very important part of my life. They're also just a ton of fun to watch and play, whether it's going to a local tournament or rewatching Little Majin vs JDCR for like the 100 billionth time.
Oh my God!
With the wave of new fighting games coming up on the horizon, I thought it'd be fun to share my history of fighting games with some tips on how to get into them yourself. My first experience with fighting games, like many people, started at my cousin's house in the mid-2000s. I'm a few years younger than my cousins, so they played a huge role in influencing the type of games that I ended up playing, with one of the biggest influences being Super Smash Bros. Melee. I don't think it needs to be said, but Super Smash Bros. Is one of the golden standards of games, period, to this day. The Smash series introduced me to so many genres of games, music, and most importantly, social interaction that I'd never experienced before as a young child. Since I was so young when Melee was still on shelves, it ended up being one of the first games that I experienced playground rumors with. When I was at school, my friends and I would start sharing stories of secret unlockable characters and rumors that they either heard or, straight up made up, which most of the time they were just straight up made up. We'd be in class like, I swear I unlocked Sonic and Goku, you just have to be Classic Adventure and All-Star mode with every single character without getting hit once and then do it backwards 3 times over before your dog dies. Someone printed out the infamous fake Melee roster image and showed it to everyone in class, which spawned an entire council debate on why it could or couldn't be real in classrooms for like a week straight. I actually didn't own my own copy of Melee for years. The only reason I ended up owning it for myself was because my aunt of all people let me have her copy of the game in like 2011, but before this moment, I would just steal it from her for weeks on end without telling her, and she just never found out because she didn't really play it that much. Because of this, most of the time I'd have to go to my cousin's house to play Melee, and we'd spend weeks trying to unlock these characters in the game for ourselves without the internet. I still vividly remember the shock of unlocking Mewtwo after we left the GameCube running for an entire night and not knowing who the hell Marth, Roy, and Ness were when we unlocked them. That sense of exploration of the game and social interaction that comes with it actually leads to one of my first tips for getting into fighting games. Find a friend to play with and learn with. Whether it's just one friend or 3, it's important in my opinion to find someone to learn the game alongside you. Fighting games are intimate and social games by nature, so having someone to experience them with you is a core part of the genre and will enhance your enjoyment of them immensely. Another game I played with my cousin around this time was Soul Calibur 2 on the GameCube. I had no idea what this game was, but my favorite character of all time, Link, was in it, so I had to be into it. I still remember dying of laughter the first time I jumped out the ring and proceeded to do it again and again and again and again until my cousin turned off the game and went to bed. I thought this was hilarious. I still think it's funny. Around this same time, my elementary school would take field trips to a mini golf and arcade place called Putt Putt, which I think is still around, where I had one of my first arcade experiences, and unfortunately one of my only ones because by the time I was this age, arcades were already like long gone. Putt Putt had a full wall of fighting games in the back, and I'd literally have to beg some of my friends to fight me in them since I was practically stealing their tokens on the Soul Calibur 3 machine. And I remember being really confused that Link wasn't in the game for whatever reason, so I ended up picking Taki. My cousins on the other side of the family, who are about 10 years older than me, indirectly introduced me to Def Jam and Tekken. During our family gatherings, which were huge, there would be about 10 or 12 kids in the bedroom taking turns fighting each other in Tekken 5. I would have been like 6 or 7 at the time in this room full of teenagers and young adults, so I had no choice but to watch. But as I did, the graphics and the music of these games completely blew me away. I still remember the first time I saw King, Jin, and Yoshimitsu fighting, and I realized that this game was a lot more advanced and grown up than Super Smash Bros. For years, every time I go to my cousin's house after that moment, I'd ask him exclusively to let me stay in his room to just play Tekken. I played through the story in arcade mode to develop an understanding of the moves in the game and the nights that I'd spent at his house, which unfortunately was to little or no avail. I could barely read, let alone understand the hieroglyphics that were Tekken notation. I was so obsessed with finally being able to play this game that I wouldn't even go outside with him when he asked. He'd leave me in his room and he'd go outside and play by himself. Even from a young age, I was a lab monster. You couldn't get me off of this game when I was over his house. 2008 was the year that Super Smash Bros. Dropped, the sequel to Super Smash Bros. Melee. I deeply followed this game online, checking the Super Smash Bros. Dojo for a new screenshot or a character reveal every waking moment possible. I still remember the first time that Sonic was revealed, completely validating every single playground rumor that I heard years before. And I'm gonna keep it real with y'all, I vividly remember crying like this Nintendo 64 kid when I first saw it. I'd played this game at my cousin's house religiously. We go through Subspace Emissary and try to unlock everything the game had to offer on weekends. Since this game had online multiplayer, I was finally able to consistently play against other people besides my cousin for the first time in any fighting game. This is when, like most people, I realized that I was actually ass at this game that I could beat all my friends at. I was consistently getting stopped online and I just didn't understand why. This led me to go online and look for videos on YouTube, which led me to discover a little tournament called EVO. EVO, if you don't know, is an annual fighting game tournament where the best of the best fighting game players go to compete. It hosts multiple tournaments for pretty much every fighting game you could think of, whether it be the most recent entry in the Street Fighter or Tekken series, or a more niche title like Vampire Savior or Dengeki Bunko. This moment opened a completely new world for me. Before this moment, I thought that fighting games were just games you play with your friends for fun and not an entire competitive community that people traveled and won money for competing in. When I watched the EVO sets for Brawl, it absolutely blew my mind, which is hilarious to say now because that game is slow as hell. These people were moving completely differently and using techniques that I couldn't even comprehend. And the commentators were speaking in the foreign language, explaining what the players were doing and thinking to me. I'm like, what is a recovery? What is a tipper? What is zoning? What are frames? What are y'all talking about?
Voice DXC glitch, that means you can do a combo into another combo with a super, but that combo is not landing any combo, but when he knocked down, it's still a combo, you understand?
Hell no, what the fuck is
That's called DXC.
Watching Tekken in particular was a completely different level of mind-blowing. I vividly remember being in my Windows XP family computer watching Ryan Hart versus Gendido in Tekken 5 VR. The way they were moving, the fact that they were doing actual combos and moves I'd never even seen before, the amount of waiting they were doing between moves, I didn't understand the level of play I was watching and I was completely captivated. This moment was also the first time I was able to discover a bunch of games that I didn't even know existed. I stumbled upon Third Strike through Moment 37 and learned the existence of a little game called Guilty Gear the same very day, which we'll get back to soon. This leads me to my second tip for getting into fighting games. Start by simply watching different types of fighting games. There's so many great sets that have single-handedly gotten me and my friends into new fighting games. Lil Majin vs JDCR at EVO 2018, the Daigo Parry and Third Strike, Leffen vs Mango at Genesis 4. There's so many storylines that play with these games that converted so many people into fighting game players, and you could be next. I suggest looking up the name of a fighting game you're interested in, followed by EVO or tournament to find some of the best sets. I'll also add a playlist of my favorite sets in the description, and feel free to share your own favorites or the one that got you into fighting games in the comments. I'd love to hear them. From this point onward, I'd watch EVO clips and eventually, oh my god, Justin TV streams religiously. That's crazy. I didn't own any fighting games aside from Smash Bros to practice what I was watching, but I gradually was learning either way through image training. This was also around the time that Street Fighter 4 released on consoles in 2009, which led to a strange era in my fighting game career and gaming in general. The early 2010s were when mobile games were seen as the future of gaming and I was buying into it. Capcom ported Street Fighter 4 and Street Fighter X Tekken to iOS, which is where I first played these games myself. And because I had the iOS version of these games, I was like, I don't need the console versions, so I'm not gonna buy them. I never ended up buying the console version of these games until the same aunt that I stole Melee from got me the PS3 copy of Street Fighter 4 Arcade Edition in 2012. This was the first online fighting game that I ever owned for myself, and I played Juri Han. I was completely ass at her in Street Fighter 4 as a whole. I was getting beat so bad that I avoided playing online for literal years and got bullied into watching the game online and playing arcade mode. On the other hand, I was slowly improving at Super Smash Bros. Brawl and going to one or two local tournaments that my friends and family would take me to. Now that I think about it, I didn't write this down, but I need to mention it. From 2008 to 2014, I was completely hooked on the City of Final Fantasy, and to this day, they're some of the best single-player fighting game experiences I think I've ever had. I spent years going through that story mode and leveling up the entire roster from the original and Duodecim, and I'm really hopeful that they give the series another chance. It's really unfortunate they never made a game after Duodecim. – 2013 was the year I started actively attempting to learn how to play a fighting game. My parents got me Tekken Tag Tournament 2 when I got a Wii U, which was one of the first launch titles, actually titles period, on the Wii U. That thing had no games. This is when I first discovered channels like Maximilian Dude to learn more about the history of the Tekken community. I didn't end up sticking with learning Tag 2 because I couldn't understand what they were talking about on Tekken's Zaibatsu forums or wrap my head around the notation. I also got super heavy into Tekken Revolution, which was the free-to-play Tekken title on the PS3, which is where I learned more about how Tekken worked. This was another weird era of gaming where they were like, first we're doing 3D games, now we're doing free-to-play games, now we're doing iOS to console ports, or I mean vice versa. It was a really weird time for gaming around the early 2010s. More importantly, the reason why I fell off of learning Tekken Tag 2 was because there was another game on the horizon by the name of Super Smash Bros. 4.
What the hell was that? Smash Brothers? What the hell?
My hype for this game was unreal. All my friends were constantly speculating about the game and was following every single whisper of news about it. I cannot talk about Smash 4 or my fighting game journey without talking about the late, great Etika. Etika was one of my biggest gateways into competitive Smash Bros for me, and I wish I could thank him for it. Etika was constantly putting out new coverage, reactions, and even an 11.5-hour stream when the game dropped early in Japan, which all contributed to my excitement for the game. If you were there during the Smash 4 era, it was a lot more than just the game. It was really the community and the community that Etika brought too. Like, he was following leaks and making up all the speculation and everything. It was a ton of fun. Even more fun than the game sometimes, honestly. A few months after Smash 4 launched, Etika began highlighting people who were covering competitive aspects of the game, such as tier lists, tech, game plans, neutral, and combos. I had a surface level understanding of these terms and concepts from forums such as Smashboards and Tekken Zaibatsu, but this was the first time I was actively given beginner-friendly guides for advanced concepts in a fighting game. This was the first time where I was practicing tech. I specifically remember learning perfect pivot, which is like really easy in retrospect, but I was like, man, this is gonna change the game for everyone. There was channels like, I think it was My Smash Corner. I still think to this day he has some of the best looking guides period in like anything. That was like my standard. I was like, why do we not have more of this? It's just usually some guy talking, but he was over here with production value and everything. I hope he's doing well. A lot of the fundamental concepts I learned in Smash 4 carry to and from other fighting games, which leads me to my third tip. Don't worry about playing the right game or learning the right way, because most of your fundamental skills will carry over between games. Some people may tell you to play X game in order to prepare for another game, but this usually isn't great advice. Just play what you want when you want. You'll have more fun learning even if it takes a little bit longer. From 2014 up to 2016, I was dedicated to playing Smash 4. I was consistently on Smash 4s learning new tech, character matchups, and the latest tier lists, and each new character reveal and speculation of what character would be next made me more and more excited to improve at the game. I think my biggest breakthrough in the game was when Ryu dropped. There was this huge meme in the community that Smash players couldn't do a fireball or a DP to save their life, which I think is hilarious. How can you not do a fireball? Y'all have never played a Street Fighter game before?
It was at this moment I learned that Smash players don't play anything outside of Super Smash Bros.
I ended up picking up my copy of Street Fighter 4 again just to improve my Ryu and understanding of Ryu in Smash, which goes back to my third tip. I entered a few online tournaments and started uploading Super Smash Bros. YouTube videos in 2015, but aside from that, this pretty much covers everything I did leading up to 2017. "2017 was the year that everything changed for me, and is the year that I officially got into traditional fighting games. I was in the process of moving across the country from Texas in 2017, so me and my cousin would start to hang out a lot more often. We'd go over to his friends' apartments to play Melee every few weeks, which was a ton of fun. But one day in early June, my cousin asked me if I wanted to come back and play a new game that just came out that very same day, with that game being Tekken 7. So I told you all about my history with the Tekken series up to this moment. This was a series that I'd always loved, but could never really get a firm grasp of since I exclusively played it myself or online. I still had no idea how Tekken worked after almost 10 years of trying to learn it here and there, but I knew what could be done from the tournament tests that I watched online. I had no plans of getting Tekken 7 because I didn't want to pay $60 for PS Plus just to get my ass beat by someone who knows how to Korean backdash and electric. But if I could play it for free, let's go. Like, I'm gonna do it. And I still vividly remember the first time we booted up the game and heard that Season 1 main menu theme. Bro, man, that theme is crazy. There were about 5 of us around the TV at the apartment taking turns in the versus mode, and the winner stayed on the sticks. Tekken 7's base roster was huge, and I wanted to play as much as possible, so I picked the characters I was comfortable enough with, rather than picking new ones. Those being King and Yoshimitsu. I remember being so confused seeing that Yoshi was some weird alien squid thing, but he looked so fire. I was getting absolutely cooked though, because I forgot everything I learned over the years, which really frustrated me. It got so sweaty that I was going on Tekken Zaibatsu forums between matches just so I'd have more time to play the game. And every time I came back in the rotation, I was doing little strings and grabs that we hadn't seen yet, and everyone was just blown away. Eventually I was cheesing everyone out enough to stay in the rotation long enough, and that process of learning something new and pulling it out in front of everyone hooked me so badly, I ended up buying the game for myself after I moved a few months later. I locked myself in the lab just like I did 10 years prior at my cousin's house and slowly started learning the fundamentals of Tekken through Eris and other YouTubers. We'll come back to this game a little later, but we need to go back to Texas in August at this point. This was the first time that I attended a regional tournament for Smash Bros called Low Tier City 4. I showed up with nothing but my GameCube controller and ended up meeting a lot of players that I've been watching for years at this point. I learned so much about the local Smash community through this event alone, and there were a ton of different vendors and things to do within the event itself, which surprised me as someone who hadn't been to a major tournament before. I was surprised at how inviting and nice everyone was when I asked for games despite the number of people at the tournament, and a lot of them took the time to teach me how to approach my character's game plan and where to look online for resources to improve. Now that I think about it, this was so long ago that Discord wasn't really even a thing yet, so they gave me their Twitter, which I think is crazy to think about. It's so long ago, but it feels like it was so recently. Within this event was one of the most important moments in my fighting game career. In the corner of Low Tier City's venue was a completely different set of fighting game players. They were playing a bunch of games that I watched at EVO the same year, but never thought I'd be able to play since I didn't have the money or means to play them. These games being Street Fighter V, Tekken 7, and Guilty Gear Xrd Rev 2. I completely stopped, GameCube controller in hand, to watch each of these games attentively. These were the games that I had seen play at the highest level earlier in the year at EVO, right before my eyes, but I had no means of playing it. I was but a simple kid with a GameCube controller and no means of playing. I was completely transfixed. Watching the way they were collectively moving and doing these long combos on arcade sticks and PS4 controllers just blew my mind. This was so different from the Smash games I was playing. One of the fighting game players playing embarrassingly noticed how long I'd been watching and asked me if I wanted to hop in and play. I remember sheepishly telling him, "I'm a Smash player," under my breath, head down. He told me to look up. "It's okay, you can play." And for whatever reason, he was nice enough to let me, some random Smash kid, borrow his PS4 controller for like an hour while he went to go get some food. This moment changed everything for me. I waited for my turn to hop on the Tekken 7 setup and play the match with King. I got completely washed as usual up at this point, and the person I was playing against asked if I was new to the game. I told him that I tried to learn the old Tekkens when I was younger, and he spent 5 or so minutes teaching me King fundamentals and what to look for when I got home, just like the Smash players did at the same event. This leads me to my fourth tip. Find community or individual members who know how to play the game and ask them for advice. 90% of the time, if you're playing offline, fighting game players will be more than happy to come and help new players get into the games, and they'll even give you priority in the rotation. I've seen many people, including myself, go from not knowing the basics of a fighting game to teaching people themselves, and this could be you too. At the end of the day, I was able to play Guilty Gear Xrd and Street Fighter V for the first time, and people were also kind enough to give me tips on how to play these games as well. When I got home that day, I was motivated enough to save up money to buy Tekken 7 and Guilty Gear Xrd a few months later. This leads into 2018. I was in a completely new state, finishing my senior year of high school and starting college, so I had nothing to really do but learn these fighting games and... Oh god. Play League of Legends.
Oh my god, bro.
Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck, man? Get your ass on.
In all seriousness, it was a pretty weird and isolating period of my life. To stay connected with my friends, I talk and play games with them through Discord. I ended up convincing a friend to pick up Tekken 7, and we learned the game through Eris's tutorials and Tekken Zaibatsu. Tekken 7's resources at the start of its life were so bad for beginners of the genre, so we really had to lock in and dig through old forum posts and YouTube videos, but I think it made me really focus on learning. I love the process of finding some niche tech and figuring out if it still worked or not, and finally developing the muscle memory for Korean backdash. Don't let this scare you off though, because thankfully games nowadays are easier to play in general and way easier to find resources for, but this period of learning for me was some of the most fun I've had with fighting games. In 2018, I picked up Soul Calibur 6, which ended up being my first fighting game that I ever bought on launch day aside from Smash 4. My college had a video game club that I've been playing Smash 4 with, so I decided that I wanted to play the new Soul Calibur with them. I set up the game and about 12 of us started to play, and it was a ton of fun. I was having a great time, but after 20 minutes or so, they collectively decided that they had enough and went straight back to playing Smash 4. And this is when I reconfirmed my bias that Smash players only want to play Super Smash Bros, which I still think is true to this day. Don't shoot me. Don't shoot me. I still think it's true. Is it true? I don't know. This experience made me so disappointed that I didn't end up playing Soul Calibur too much after this point, since I was so invested in Tekken and didn't have a character that really grabbed me in the end. In December 2018, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate dropped, and the first thing that I did the next weekend was go to a tournament called Dome Park in the Grass 2018. I ended up meeting a lot of really cool people, but this ended up being the last time that I played Super Smash Bros. competitively before I converted to fighting games. I still played online with friends casually when new characters came out, but the netcode was just way too bad for me to actively play with them, which was really unfortunate because I loved that game. In 2019, I convinced another group of friends and my best friend to pick up Tekken 7, which is where things really started to shift for me. The 4 of us would run lobbies every day with me teaching them a little bit of fundamental Tekken I knew. I personally love teaching in general, so I wrote a Google Doc of fundamental concepts, controls, and even matches to watch to speed up their learning process. And through this process I learned so much about the game itself and improved my own understanding of Tekken. There's that saying that you learn faster when you teach, which is 100% true, and every time they had a question, I had to understand why they were asking it, the reason why it works or why it doesn't work. This is why it's so important to find people of all skill levels to play with, whether they're new or veteran players. You can always learn something new, which is why I love the genre so much. I slowly started to see my friends improve and eventually fall out of favor of fighting games, unfortunately, for the flavor of the month shooter. But me and my best friend continued to play fighting games together, both new and old. When the lockdown started in 2020, which is crazy to think that was 4 years ago, we developed an addiction to trying out every single fighting game we could find on Steam or Fightcade. And to this day, we both own and have played almost every single fighting game available on Steam for like at least 5 hours. One of the first fighting games we really fell in love with was Melty Actress Again Current Code, and to this day we're still chasing the dragon of the first month of labbing this game out. For context, the only fighting games we really understood at a basic level up to this point were Tekken 7 and maybe Guilty Gear Xrd, and I hadn't really even found my main character in that game yet. We were both still playing on PS4 controllers and we had little to no 2D game fundamentals. This game really changed all of that for us. The reason we picked up Melty Blood is because it was free and it looked cool, and we heard a lot of people whispering about it in the community. I didn't realize how big of an impact this game would have on me in retrospect. It helped me understand what my preferences were between different fighting games, and I learned that I love exploring fighting games with a ton of character expression, movement options, and deep mechanics. Melty Actress Again Current Code has 31 different characters with 3 different groups, which technically means that there's 93 different characters in the game. We spent weeks playing through the roster and finding out who we liked and why, and this exploration period of fighting games with my friends is one of my favorite parts of the genre. I was so intrigued by the characters in this game that I read through the entirety of Tsukihime within like a week, which led me to read other visual novels such as Fate and Umineko, which you may have heard me talk about on this channel once or twice or 3 times. Also, I will never forgive y'all for doing that to Melty Blood with Mecho Arc. Like, I'm actually livid about that. You guys ruined everything. After Melty Blood, I decided to start streaming some of the fighting games that we played and discovered, which led to us picking KOF 13 up because it was really cheap on Steam. Just like Melty Blood, KOF is a series with deep mechanics and a lot of character combinations to choose from. While we were streaming, someone came into the chat and gave us advice on how to approach the game and learn our characters, which goes back to what I said about the community. They love seeing new players pick up their games despite what you may see on Twitter. Which leads me to my 5th and probably most important tip.
Avoid FGC Twitter, especially if you play anime fighters.
I think from this point, it'd be a little bit too time consuming to go over every little detail in every game that we played, so I'll just hit the highlights because believe me, we spent a week minimum playing every game we could find from like 2020 to 2023. There's just way too much to talk about. In August of 2021, I decided that I love fighting games enough to invest in getting an arcade stick. As a musician, I love trying out different types of instruments, so I think that getting a stick was always something that I was interested in. It was really difficult to find one that was affordable during this time, but I eventually found someone who was selling a Razer Panthera off OfferUp for like $100, which is highway robbery for that stick even at that time. I even haggled them down to like $85, which is insane. I met up with him in like a random Target parking lot and we talked about fighting games for a bit with him and his friend who came with him. I asked him what he played and why he was selling his stick, and he told me that he was a Skullgirls player and that he was building his own hitbox, which is a cheating controller with keyboard buttons instead of a stick. He literally walked off into the sunset and I never saw him again. But at least I had an arcade stick. I feel that for me personally, an arcade stick completely changed my love of fighting games for the better. Now I had an even more tactical feedback to the moves I was inputting in the game. Every time I did an anti-air DP, my entire left arm had to react to it rather than my thumb. Moving in Tekken felt like a rhythmic dance that I've performed for years once I finally got it down. The arcade stick was like an instrument and the combos were my music, and I became addicted to using an arcade stick and just feeling the games. This led to me playing even more fighting games just to feel the rhythm of different combos and movements. Even if using a controller or a hitbox is objectively better from a competitive standpoint, I just love the feeling of using an arcade stick. I think if you were to ask my friend, he'd say the same thing too because he bought a stick shortly after I did. I even ended up buying a stick for my cousin that invited me over to play Tekken 7 in the first place as well. Also, cousin, if you're watching this, I need you to hop back on the stick, man. It hasn't been used in months. Let's get it working, bro. Picking up an arcade stick also allowed me to play more technical characters, which made me fall even more in love with the genre. I found out that I actually really love charge characters, which are pretty much all I play nowadays. When I went back to play Guilty Gear Xrd, I ended up falling in love with Venom, who's a charge character who I avoided at first, and instantly switched from my main Faust to him. Venom is a character that I can and probably will write an entire video on in the future. He's an assassin that fights using a pool stick. I'm just gonna say it again. He's an assassin that fights using a pool stick. You know how cool that is? When you play as Venom, you create ball formations using a combination of charge inputs and specials, and everything that you put on the screen interacts with each other, so you can create these crazy formations of like just ricocheting off of each other to hit each other in combo, which is crazy. And at any point you could switch between zoning or pressuring your opponent with ball setups and specials. This is the most freeform character I've ever played in any fighting game, and I'm completely in love with this character. From this point on, I looked for aspects of his gameplay in every single character I picked up in a fighting game, and even went on back into previous fighting games that we played and discovered new characters with these new execution skills I unlocked, which was very rewarding. I discovered that I really love playing zoners and expressive characters, and that my friends think the way I play is aggravating and annoying.
Bro, like, what's fun about this?
From this point on until the end of the lockdown, I was pretty much exclusively playing fighting games with my friend and ranked every once in a while, slowly improving my fundamentals between different games that we tried out. I also entered a few ICFC online tournaments during the lockdown, but I was not rocking with them. My computer was not acting right to do that. Some of the highlights of the games that we played included Marvel vs. Capcom 3, which I played before previously at like my cousin's house again, The Last Blade 2, Under Night In-Birth, I think it was Latest at the time, and BlazBlue Central Fiction. For the sake of the video length, I'll probably talk about more of these fighting games and characters that I love in another video, so stay tuned for that. 2022 was the year that I was finally able to tap into my local fighting game scene after living in the area for a few years. The lockdown was essentially a hyperbolic time chamber, and it was finally time to fight so. I found out that my local weekly tournament was starting up again, so I packed my heavy ass arcade stick and set out to play. And when I arrived, there were about 12 setups of various games to choose from and a ton of friendly people to play with. And I started going every week and made a bunch of friends that I still talk to this day, even outside of fighting games. Funnily enough, I found out that some of the people there recognized me from some of my YouTube videos and Twitter videos at the time, which just blew me away. I was like, wait, what? People are actually watching my videos and exist in real life? That's insane to me. But yeah, that pretty much leads me to where I am today. Right now I've just graduated college, so I have nothing but time on my hands, just like I did when I moved out here and started learning Tekken 7. And Tekken 8 is coming out next week. But my plans right now are to travel and meet as many people as possible, and I think that fighting games are a really great vessel for that. One of the greatest experiences in fighting games for most people is engaging with the offline community. There are so many roles even outside of just playing the game, such as spectators, commentators, tournament organizers, artists, and vendors within the community that makes the FGC so much more than just press buttons good, and I think that's beautiful as someone who loves video games. These games are unique in that they have a way of innately connecting people through them. And I cannot recommend this enough as my final tip. If you have a tournament in your area, whether it be local, regional, or major, and you have even the slightest interest in fighting games, you should go check them out. As I said before, the community is more than happy to help you learn the game as a new beginner player, and it's a great way to make new friends. Every single one of my favorite experiences in the fighting game community involved connecting with other people, even when I was reluctant to do so myself, and I think that could be you too. So now comes the part where we get you into fighting games. The first step is finding a game that you want to play. Luckily, we're in an era where there's multiple new games with active player bases to choose from. Just start with whatever looks appealing to you, whether it be a certain character, the music, or the gameplay of the fighting game. If you don't know what games you'd like, I suggest going on YouTube and looking for Evo matches like I did, or even watching a Twitch streamer play the game. I think Twitch is a great option for fighting games because streamers like Sajim are more than happy to answer new player questions, and it's closer to the experience you'd have as a non-tournament player. It's also not a bad idea to look into some older fighting games on Steam or Fightcade as well, since they're usually dirt cheap on sale if not free. Also, don't worry about not having an arcade stick or anything either. Most, if not all, modern fighting games are designed around controllers anyway, so there's no disadvantage to not having one. It's more of a preference than anything. This isn't required watching or anything, but I'd also suggest some of these YouTubers and streamers. Their videos are a large part of people's fighting game journeys, and I highly recommend you check them out. Core A Gaming just makes great documentaries on how fighting games work and highlights the storylines and communities within them. Sajim is a commentator that talks about the mechanics, philosophy, and knowledge behind fighting games design and the different types of philosophies behind them. Maximilian Dude is just an overall great streamer that loves the genre and builds hype for every game that comes out. Max is pretty much the one-stop shop for everything fighting games, so if there's a new reveal or release, you'll know about it if you subscribe to him. And my personal favorite is Majin Obama. He has a lot of knowledge of all the different scenes that go on, and he's just a real ass dude overall if you want to learn more about the history of fighting games. Feel free to drop your own video or channel suggestions or ask for any specific recommendations in the comments as well. And that's the end of the video. Thank you all so much if you stuck around for this long to watch this video. I know it's not typically what I do on this channel, but I really had a burning desire to just talk about this because I just love fighting games so much. If you get into fighting games, let me know. I'm more than happy to hear about it. Let me know if you want to play any sets. Follow me on Twitch and all that. I'm going to be streaming fighting games heavy after this week. Tekken 8 is going to take over my life. But yeah, I'll catch y'all later.